Hi, and welcome to building a JavaScript whack-a-mole game. My name is Scott Bartow, and this class is generously offered to you by the Clifton Park Half Moon Library. Let's see. In today's tutorial, we're going to be using the three tools, I would call them, to create a web game. And those tools are HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And now HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language for anybody who hasn't used any of these tools yet. And HTML is basically the foundation of every web page out there in the universe. And it's the building blocks of a web page. So you can write HTML code to create a static web page. Now CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets, and that is that's a tool that we use to basically make to make the appearance of the web page better. It makes the web page pretty, and it's a cosmetic enhancement tool. And the final tool, which is an actual programming language, is JavaScript, which gives the web page functionality. It makes it interactive, makes it come alive and be dynamic. So that's what we'll be using tonight. It's not very high level for any of the three tools. There's not a whole lot of code for each of the three programs that we're going to be writing. So let's get started. So first program we're going to be writing, I'm using a Windows machine for today's class, and I've downloaded Notepad++. Every Windows machine comes with Notepad, the basic version, but Notepad++ has a few more features that make writing programs easier. And so if you look to the left of my screen, you can see I've got Notepad++ open. And so let's see, I'll close this one file out. So if I do file and I do new file, it basically creates a new file for me. And we're going to start off with writing our HTML code. And so with HTML, there's a basic template that you have to follow. And so the first line is in HTML, HTML is composed of tags. And so the first tag is lesson sign, exclamation point, capitalized DOC TYPE space, and then you put in the name of the language that you're using, HTML, and then you close the tag out with a greater than sign. Hit enter a couple times. Then we're going to do an opening HTML tag. Enter a bunch of times, and then we'll do a closing HTML tag. This will be the last line of our HTML file. And the way to do a closing tag is you do the lesson sign, and then you do a forward slash, and then the tag name, and then the greater than sign. Now, inside every HTML page is our two sessions. There's a head session, so we'll do that. Head. And I'll do, now this, you don't have to indent, but it makes your code look a whole lot neater. So all the tags will be inside the opening and closing HTML tags. So the head tags, I've got an opening head tag, and I'll do a closing head tag. And then go down a few lines, and then we'll do an opening body tag. 2 lines down, we'll do a closing body tag, BODI. right? And then inside, so the head section of your HTML page is going to display information about the file. The body section is going to be displaying information about that's actually on the web page. So head section in the web, what the web page is about, and the body section is what's actually going to be displayed in the web page, on the web page. Within the head section, we can add a meta tag. This is just a single opening meta tag. And we're going to do a character set, so char set equals double quotes UTF -8. Oops. So char set CHARSET equals, where's my equal sign, equals, and then double quotes UTF -8, double quotes, and it'll close out the tag. Hit enter a couple times. Then we'll do a title tag. So we'll do an opening title tag, and then we'll do a closing title tag, all on the same line. And then within the title tag, we're just going to call this, we'll say rack more game. All right. So that'll be the title of our web page. And now down in the body section, we're going to add a couple things. So I'll indent inside the body, and I'm going to add a couple tags. So the first tag is going to be a H2. H stands for header tag. H2. So I'll do opening, and the heading I'm going to give it is your store. And then I'll do a closing H2 tag. And next, we're going to do an H2 tag. Actually, this is going to go together. H2. And I'll do a closing H2 tag. All right. And then in HTML, you can add attributes or more information for that tag, for individual tags, by putting attributes inside of the opening tag. So here I have an opening H2 tag, so I'm going to put this attribute inside of here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it an ID. So the attribute name is ID equals double quote. And I'm going to call this ID store. And that's the only attribute that we have to add. And I'm going to give it an initial value of 0. All right, so we have an H2 tag that says your store, and underneath it, the line under it, with an ID of store, we're going to have the value. We're going to initialize the value to 0. All right, and then we're going to have another couple of H2 tags. H2, and here we're going to have time left. Oh boy, that's a mess. Greater than sign, and we'll have time left. And then I'll do a closing H2 tag, hit enter, and then we'll have one more H2. And we're going to initialize this to 60 seconds. That'll be the length of our game. And I'll do a closing H2. And then here also, I'm going to have to add the attribute ID. So I go into the opening H2 tag, ID equals double quote, and I'll throw this time dash left for the ID. All right, so we've got some of our basic heading tags in there. And so at this point, why don't we save the file? So I'll do a file. And I will do a save as. And here I've created a folder. So go into your hard drive, create a folder. Maybe call it Whack-A-Mole, JavaScript Whack-A-Mole game for the folder name. And that's what I've done here. JavaScript Whack-A-Mole game. So I'll double click on that. Okay. And in Notepad, what you have to do when you go to save your file is underneath the file name, there's a save as type, and it'll always be set to normal text file. We don't want that because we want this file to be an HTML file. So click on the drop down arrow and then go to the top, and you want to select all types. And then now you can go into the file name box, and from here we'll do, we're going to call it, I'll call it whack-a-mole.html. All right, whack-a-mole.html. There can be no spaces in your file name, so don't do that. And I'll hit save. And so now my file is saved. And once you save the file as an HTML file, in Notepad, it'll colorize the different tag names and different commands. You can see ID. The ID attribute turns to red. The values, score and time left, turn to like a purplish color. The tag names all turn to a blue. So let's see, head. Okay. See, my closing head tag stayed black. It didn't turn to a blue color. And the reason is because up here, after the closing title tag, I have an extra lesson sign. So I'm going to delete that. Once I delete that, then my heading tag turns to blue. All right, so that's how we save our file. And now what we want to do is we want to go into, in Windows, we want to go into File Explorer. And the way to do that is you go down here to the bottom left, you right click on your start. And for me, for a Windows 10 operating system, I go up to like the 5th one from the bottom, File Explorer, click on that. And that will open it up. And I will go into my JavaScript Whack-A-Mole folder. And here you can see I've got my Whack-A-Mole HTML file. And if I double click on that, it will run my file in a Chrome browser. I'm using Chrome also. And you can see the H2 tab, your scores being displayed, the zeros being displayed, time left, and 60. Now I do notice a greater than sign up here. So if I go back to my code, I have a greater than sign running wild somewhere. Let's say that's that title, header. Where's the greater than sign? Body, HTML doc. That's good. Now it looks like everything's fine, so it must be somewhere, but I just don't see it. So I'll try and find some later on. Hopefully it'll turn up. So now next thing, why don't I actually, I have the game up and running in a separate browser. So why don't I show you what the end result is going to look like? All right, so if I run this, all right, so here's what the game is going to look like. And my laptop screen is a little bit small. Put it up there. See, this is the mole image that I'm using. Anyway, if I refresh this browser session, it will turn my score to 0, and it'll have time left starting at 60, and it'll kick off the timer right away. All right, so I have 60 seconds to play the game. I'm using my mouse to click on wherever the mole winds up being, and our grid for our game is 3 boxes across and 3 boxes down. So it's a 3x3 grid, and now you can see once I refresh, the sword goes to 0, time left goes to 60, and starts counting down. And so I'm not very good at this game, but let's see if I can get a couple of scores. So this is what our game is going to end, the end result of our game is going to look like. I'm not sure. I only have one so far. All right, so I'm just going to stay up here and wait. There you go. There, now I'm getting some points. All right, so I'm up to 5 now. I'm down to 23 seconds, 22 seconds. All right, so you get the idea. That's how a game's going to be played. So I'll go back to the browser session that we were using. All right. So this is what we created. All right. So I'll just put that there for now. And I'll put this up here. Okay. So with our HTML file, we have to add a few more things. All right. Not too much more, really. So now let's make the grid. All right. So what we're going to be using is div tags. So I'll do an opening div tag, hit enter a few times. I'll do a closing div tag. All right. And like I said before, when you're adding attributes, you have to add it into the opening tag, not the closing tag ever. All right. So in this div tag, we're going to give it a class equal to double quotes grid. All right. That's just the way to identify it. So a class for this, the whole grid is the class name is going to be grid. So now inside the div, we're going to have another div. And let's see, we're just going to have it display. We're not going to have it display anything. So I'll do an opening div. I'll do a closing div. And then inside this div tag, we're going to have a couple attributes. We're going to give it a class equal to square, right? Because this is going to be one of the squares. And we separate attributes with a space, not with a comma, not with a plus sign. So we have the first attribute, class equals double quote square, double quote. And then the next attribute, we're going to give it an ID equal to double quote 1. All right, so this square is going to have a class, is going to have an ID of 1, because it's going to be the first square in the upper left-hand corner of our grid. Now we need 8 more squares, and so copy the line you just created. Underneath it, we're going to paste it 8 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. All right, so now we have 9. And they're all going to have the class of square, and you'll see why later. But their IDs are all going to be different. They're all going to be numbers 1 through 9. 4, 5, and 6, and 7, and 8, 9. Okay. Yeah. Let me get the closing div here. All right. So, all right. Now these 9 divs have to be indented inside the grid div. All right. So, let's say those are divs. Get rid of some of this white space. Now I'm going to save it. Save your HTML file. Go back to your browser session. And all you have to do is refresh it. You don't have to keep going into File Explorer and run the HTML file every time. Once you run it one time and you keep it up in your browser, then all you have to do is refresh. So now I'm going to refresh this, and we should have a 3x3 grid being displayed. All right, ready? And nothing's happening. Oh, that's right. The grid is not going to be displayed just because I put all these div tags in my HTML file. The grid will not be displayed until we add some like CSS or possibly JavaScript. All right. I think all we have to do is add CSS. So for now, let's just keep our HTML file the way it is, and now let's do a file, new file, and now we're going to create our CSS file. All right. And let's say, so CSS, okay, and the first thing we're going to do with CSS, the way it's structured is you do the selector, the tag you want to give style to, followed by space, followed by a curly bracket, and then a curly bracket underneath. So the first thing we want to select is all tags that have a class of grid. All right. So the way you select a class is with a dot and then the class name. So from our HTML page up here, the whole grid was given a class with a class name of grid. All right. So I want to, in my CSS, I want to do dot grid as the selector and give style to the grid. All right. And the way to do that is just by doing do dot, then the class name, dot grid, space, and then an opening curly bracket, hit enter a couple times, and then do a closing curly bracket underneath the dot in grid. All right. And then indented inside this is where we're adding individual styles. All right. So the styles we want to add are width equals, and the width is going to be 606 pixels, followed by a semicolon. Semicolon is how you concatenate styles. Oops. First I have to end with a double quote, semicolon. Sorry. Semicolon. Where are you? Oh, there it is. All right. Hit enter. And the next style for the grid class is going to be height. And that's going to be the same thing. Oh, sorry. It's not equals. It's followed with a colon. Sorry. In CSS, it's the style name, in this case width, then a colon, and then the actual value surrounded by quotes. All right. Actually, sorry. The value is not surrounded by quotes. All right. Let me get this straight. I don't know what I'm thinking. Enter. All right. So this is how it's set up in CSS. You do your selector, space, open curly brackets, closing curly brackets at the bottom. Inside indented are your individual styles for that tag you're selecting. And so you do the style name width, in this case, followed by a colon, followed by the actual value. And the value for width is 606 ps. PS stands for pixels. And then you end it with semicolon so that you can, semicolon is used to concatenate other styles. So the next style is height, colon, and that's also going to be 606 ps, semicolon, hit enter. Then we'll do display, colon, and we're going to use flesh, semicolon, hit enter, and then flesh dash wrap, colon, and the value is going to be wrap, semicolon. I'm going to put a space after the colon so it's a little clearer on what the styles and the style names and style values are. All right, and that's it for the grid class. All right, so hit enter down below, and now we're going to select something else. We're going to select the square, so the square class, and so you have to preface it with dot square space semi open curly bracket, hit enter a few times, closing curly bracket. And then inside we're going to do the individual styles. We're going to have height, 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 okay, colon. And the height of square is going to be 200 PS. Semicolon, we'll do width, colon, 200 PS, semicolon, and enter. And the final style for the square class is going to be border, colon, and we'll do solid black 1 PS, semicolon. All right. So that's all for the square class. Now remember, if you go back to your HTML page, the square class are these 9 squares, right? They all have the class of square, but they have unique IDs, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So if we go back to CSS, we want to create one more thing. And what that is we want to create the mole image. All right, I downloaded the mole image and from the internet and placed it inside my folder that's called JavaScript Whack-A-Mole game. The same folder that holds this HTML file, the CSS file, and eventually the JavaScript file. So so we haven't done it yet, but in our JavaScript, we're going to have a mole class. And so right here, I'm selecting the mole class. So it's .mole, and I'll do open curly bracket, hit enter a couple times, do closing curly bracket. And here, we're just going to have a couple of styles. So the styles are going to be background, dash image, and followed by a colon, space, and then the values of the URL. And here is where I have to, in double quotes, I have to do the name of my mole image file. So it's mole.jpg, JPG, double quote, closing parenthesis, semicolon. And then the background size, colon, space, and we'll do cover and semicolon. All right. So that's it for CSS. That's all the styles we're going to be adding. We're going to be adding styles for the class grid, styles for the class square, and styles for the class mole. All right. So hit. Let's do a file, save as, and go to your JavaScript Whack-A-Mole folder, which I'm in. And as the save as type will always sum up normal text file when you're using Notepad. Click on the drop down, scroll to the top, click on all types. And once you click on all types, all your files in that folder just get displayed now. All right, so let's see, I'm going to call this, I'm going to call it styles. All right. All types. So it's going to be styles, plural, .css. All right. I already have that file, so I'll say yes. And now, once you save it as a CSS file, you notice the selectors turn red, the style turn blue, and the values stay black. All right, so now we have our CSS file, but how do we connect? How do we let our HTML file know that that the CSS file is out there to be used? So the way to do that is go back to your HTML file, up in the head section, we're going to create a link tag. So less than link. Right. Close it out. And let's just go back. So the link tag is just a single opening tag. There is no closing link tag. But it's going to have two very important attributes inside of it. And the first one is rel equals double quotes, and this is a style sheet. Remember, CSS stands for cascading style sheets. So the rel has to be style sheet. And remember, we concatenate attributes with a space. So space, and then href, hreference, double quotes. And here's where we name our CSS file that we just created. So we named it styles.css, double quote. All right. All right. Now save your HTML file, and if you didn't do it before, save your CSS file. Okay. And go back off to the right of my screen. You can see I still have my the game up in a web browser. So all I have to do is refresh it, and boom, I still have my H2 tags, your score 0, time left is 60. But now I've got a 3x3 grid. All right. 3x3. All right. So what's next? Well, we have to move on to the thing that's actually going to make the game work, which is JavaScript. Right? So in Notepad, let's do a file, new file. And here we're going to create our JavaScript. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create 4 constants. In JavaScript, the keyword to create a constant, which a constant is just a variable that has a constant value. All right, so the keyword in JavaScript is const, so it's an abbreviation for constant. And const, and the first constant that we're going to create is called squares, and we're going to make it equal to document, right? So our web page is the document, right? And so we're going to say document dot, and then we're going to use something called query selector all, capital S selector, capital A all, and then we'll do double quotes, open parenthesis, double quote, and then we're going to call the .square class that we have on our HTML page. All those 9 divs, each one is an individual square, and double quote and closing parenthesis. All right, end your JavaScript line with semicolon. All right, next constant. So what this is doing, what query selector all is going to do is going to select all things that have a class of square. All right, so it's going to select all 9 boxes in our grid. All right, and that will be wrapped up in what we call squares for the variable name. All right, so constant. And the next one is mole. All right, equals document dot. Now here we're not going to do query select all, but we're going to do document dot query selector, and that's it. And then open parenthesis, double quotes, and what we want is the class mole. All right, because the mole is only going to be in one square at a time, right? It's going to move around, and you have to try and catch it. All right, closing parenthesis, and I'll finish with semicolon and enter. Now let's do a couple more constants. I keep them all together. So C-O-N-S-T, and this time it's going to be time left equals, and we'll do document dot query selector quotes, and here we're going to have the ID. So you have to preface any reference to an ID with a hashtag. When you're referencing a class, you have to preface it, the class name with a dot, like above, dot square and dot mole. But for an ID, we have to preface it with a hashtag. So it's hashtag time dash left. That was the ID that we gave it. And I'll double quote it, closing parentheses, semicolon, hit enter. And we have one more constant score equals document dot query selector parentheses double quotes, and we're doing ID reference here. So it's hashtag score double quotes closing parentheses and semicolon. Hit enter. All right, now we have to create 4 variables. All right, these 4 variables in JavaScript, you can use the keyword to create a variable of var for var variable, or let for let. So here I'm just gonna I'll just use var result equals 0. Oops. So the variable name is result, and then I'm going to initialize it with a value of 0. Enter. Then we have var hit position, and I'm not going to give this any initialization initial value. Hit enter. Then with var, we have current time, capital T time, space equals, and we're going to make this initial value of 60. Hit enter. Then we have var timer, capital I, lowercase t, timer ID, space equals, and then we're going to give it a value of null, which is basically nothing. All right. All right. So we have our 4 constants. We have our 4 variables. Now let's create our first function. All right. In JavaScript, you have to use the keyword name function to create a function. So it's function followed by the function name, which is going to be random, capital S square, and then with opening parentheses, close parentheses, space, opening curly bracket, hit enter a few times, closing curly bracket, and then that's basically the template of a function in JavaScript. You have the keyword function, space, function name, open parentheses, close parentheses, space, open curly bracket. A few lines down under the F in function, you have your closing curly bracket. Then indented inside are the lines that you want executed when this function is called. A function is just a package of code that is very portable. You can use it anywhere. All you have to do is call it. You can define it one time, and then you can call it from anywhere, from any program. So inside here, we're gonna have squares. The constant that we created on the very first line. So squares, and we have dot for each, capital E, each. For each square, equal sign, greater than sign, space, and then opening curly bracket down below under the S for squares dot for each. You can have your closing curly bracket, and then inside of this loop, we're going to have square. Have square dot class capital L list dot remove parenthesis single quote mole single quote closing parenthesis semicolon. All right, and actually down here it's closing curly bracket, but then you're gonna have the closing parenthesis. All right, to close out this. Right, so we have the opening parenthesis here, we have the opening curly bracket, then we have closing curly bracket, and then the closing parenthesis. All right, so that closes this out. All right, so we only have one thing going on inside of the for each, and then if you go down a couple lines, here we're going to do a we're going to create a variable random square random ARE, and that's going to equal to squares parenthesis, and or actually squares is going to be a open square bracket, and we're going to have we control the math library, so math dot and then the method floor, which means it'll round down parenthesis, and then we'll have control the math library again dot random parenthesis, so for a random number generator, so that we can randomly have the mole go into each of the 9 boxes, and you never know where it's going to wind up, and that's the whole point of the game, right? And you have to be fast with your mouse to be able to click on where the mole winds up. So that times, we use asterisk for the times symbol, times 9, close out parenthesis, and then close out with a square bracket. All right, and that is what random square is going to be. And down below that, we're going to do random square, use IntelliSense, random square dot class list dot add parenthesis single quote, and we're going to have mole single quote and semicolon. Then a couple lines down below, all within this one function that we're creating called random square, you're going to have hit position. Squares, sorry, messed that up a little bit. All right, so we're going to have hit position dot or equals that and semicolon. All right, so hit position space equals space, and random. Now I'm calling my function random square dot ID. All right. So random square, the whole point of the function is to move the mole into a random square. All right, so hit enter, and so what we're going to do next is we're going to do, so we're going to say squares, this is outside the function, squares, plural, dot for each. All right, and then in parentheses, we're going to do square, space, oops, square space equal, greater than sign, space, let's say, and then followed by curly bracket, opening curly bracket, and then let's hit enter a few times, and we'll have a closing curly bracket, closing parenthesis, and then inside of this loop, right? We're looping around the squares. We're going to have square dot add capital E event, capital L listener, and then in parentheses, what are we going to have? We're going to have single quote and mouse down, single quote, comma, space, and then opening parentheses, closing parentheses, space, and we'll have equal to, greater than, space, and we'll have a opening curly bracket. So, opening curly bracket. Okay, there we go. All right, so that's our event listener. And then, so we've got the opening curly brackets, and down below under the S in square dot add event listener, we need a closing curly bracket. And then inside of that, so I have to indent, we're going to have an if. So if space parenthesis, if you have square dot ID space equals hit position. So if the square dot ID, which you remember in HTML, each of the squares we gave it an ID, a unique ID, right? 1 through 9. So in JavaScript, we're saying the square dot ID, if it equals the hit position, so the hit position is the random square dot ID. So if they're one and the same, if I click where the mole is, then that's a good thing. That means we want to add a point, right? So hit position, and then we'll close it out with a parenthesis, space, and then we'll do a curly bracket. Hit enter a couple times. We need a closing curly bracket underneath the I in if, right? It all should be lined up and indented. I'm a big proponent of indenting because it makes your code so much more readable for not just for yourself when you come back to your program, maybe months later, but also for anybody who's trying to pick up your program and figure it out on their own. So inside the if, we're going to add 1 to result. And we do that by naming the variable name result. And then we just do a plus plus. Plus plus. All right, semicolon, hit enter. And then we do store. So store dot test capital C content space equals result. And then the final one is hit position equals null. So we have to reset the hit position, right? All this is happening in fractions of a seconds. And that's it for this stuff. So that's that. Get rid of that. Okay. All right. And now we have to add another function. All right. Couple more. All right. So we're going to add the function and we're going to name it move mole. Right? We need to move the mole around, right? And hit space, open curly bracket, 2 lines down, closing curly bracket. Oops, that's a square bracket. Closing curly bracket under the F in function. Inside the function, all we're going to do is one command. So we're going to do timer, capital I, lowercase d, timer ID, space. It's going to equal set, capital I, interval, open parenthesis, we'll do random. So we're calling random square. Up here, right, we define this function named random square. So we're calling that function random square, comma, 500. All right. So 500 milliseconds is half a second. All right. So it's moving pretty fast. All right. You can always change this if you want the mole to move slower, just so you can see how the game's played a little easier. And that's it for that function. All right. Let's go scroll down. Now we have to call that function. So the function is defined, and now we'll call it. So move mole. The way to call the function is just use the function name followed by parentheses. And if there are no parameters, if there are parameters when you define your function, if you have parameters, they would be inside the parentheses. And then when you call your function, you would give it arguments. So you would pass values to those parameters up here. All right, so I'm calling the function move mole, and it has no parameters, so I'm not passing any arguments. So it's open parenthesis, closing parenthesis, and I can give it a semicolon and enter. Now we have one more function. All right, so we start with the keyword function, space, and this one is called count, capital D down, parenthesis, space, open curly bracket, closing curly bracket under the F in function. Inside the function, we are going to have, let's say, we're going to do current time. Remember the variable we created up above. And we're going to do current time, and then we're going to subtract 1. So negative, negative. That's all you have to do. Hit enter. And then we'll do time left, capital E left, L left, dot text content equals current time. All right, so this is our countdown. That's current time. Now, a couple lines down, we have to do an F or an if inside this countdown function. All right, I'll go here, I'll go there. If space, open parenthesis, if the current time, capital T time, right? If that equal 0, close parenthesis, space, open curly bracket, hit enter a few times. Under the I and if, you do a closing curly bracket. And then go up here, indent inside the if. If this happens, so if we wind down from 60 seconds all the way down to the current time is 0, then we have to clear things out and end the game, right? Your time has run out. So we'll do clear interval, parenthesis, count down. So here we're calling our own function, right? Oh, no, we're calling countdown timer ID. Timer ID and parenthesis. And we hit enter. And then we'll do alert. All right, we're just doing a quick alert box when the game is over. So in JavaScript, it's alert, parenthesis, and then we'll do test. You can always use single quotes or double quotes. I'm using single quotes here. So we'll say game, capital G game, over. Actually, over. Where'd I go? Let's do capitals, game, O-V-E-R, exclamation point, space, and then we'll say your final score was space, and then we'll end it with a single quote, and then we concatenate tests with variable values with a plus sign, so plus, and then we want the value that is stored in the variable name result. And then let's say that, and then hit enter. Oh, no, don't need enter. That's it for the if. All right. So if current time winds down to 0, clear interval, countdown, timer ID. And then we'll do an alert box that says game over, exclamation point, your final score was, and then whatever your final score was. All right, so that is it. We have one more line. That is all inside the function countdown. All right, so I can get rid of some of these lines, bring up this closing curly bracket. All right, so that's the function countdown, and then we have one line left. We're going to create a variable called, here's where we had the countdown timer ID. So we're going to create the variable here, countdown timer, capital ID, equals set interval. My IntelliSense came up here. Double click on it. So set interval, parenthesis, count, capital D down, comma, and then 1000. And that is all she wrote. All right, let's save our JavaScript file. So file, save as. All right, remember your save as type, you have to change, click on the drop down, change it from normal text file to all types. Once you do that, you get these other files that come up. Why don't we call our JavaScript file, why don't we call it whack-a-mole.js, JS for JavaScript. So whack-a-mole.js, save it. All right, now we have to go back to our HTML file. Do one more thing. We have to go to the HTML file. We have to, how do we tell the HTML file to use the whack-a-mole.js file? So the way we do that is in the body section, down below, the grid div. What we'll use is a script. So do an opening script tag and a closing script tag. So script, all on the same line. And then we'll do a closing script tag. There we go. Now we have to add an attribute inside the opening script tag. So that attribute will be all it is a an attribute called source. Source equals double quotes, and then you have to put the name of your file, your JavaScript file in there. All right, and we called it whack-a-mole.js, and then end it with a double quote, and that's it. Now your HTML file has up here in the head section, we have this link to tell it to go to this styles.css file for our styles. And down here, in the body section, we have our script tag that tells us to go to our whack-a-mole.js file to grab JavaScript that's going to make our game actually function. All right, so let's see, everything's saved. Save your HTML file. We just added this script line, so you have to save your HTML. Go back to your game, your web browser, click on refresh, and It's not working. If I refresh, right, and the mole, it's not showing up. So one thing you can do, we are in Chrome. All right, so I'll stretch that out. All right, so we're in Chrome, and one thing you can do is if you hit Control, what is it? Control Shift J, and you're in Chrome, it'll bring up this nice web development tool off to the right of my browser session. All right, and you can see right away when you do what was it? Alt Shift J. J will bring you right to this console tab. All right, and within the console, you can see this nice bright red error, uncaught syntax error, missing parenthesis after argument list, whack-a-mole. So it's in my whack-a-mole.js file, and it's on, for me, line 21. So what I do is I go back here, and I go to my whack-a-mole.js file, I look up line 21, and let's see, I've got function, parenthesis, closing curly brackets. Somehow I'm missing a closing parenthesis. All right, so it looks like function random, that, and this closing curly brackets fine. But I got swears, oh, I see. Swears dot for each, swear that. I'm missing, for squares, I'm missing a closing curly bracket followed by closing parenthesis. And let's scroll over. I've got square bracket, that. Yep, that's okay, that's okay. I think that's it. So I'll save my JavaScript file, come over here to my browser session, and I'll refresh it. My error goes away, but now I have another one. whack-a-mole.js on line 30. This is line 32. All right, so I'll go over here, look up line 30, and let's say I've got swears for each. Let's see, curly bracket, parenthesis. All right, swears dot event listener. I've got a curly bracket, if parenthesis, curly bracket, blah blah blah. So it's saying line 30. Line 30. Let me just say. App. Bracket, that listener, mouse. That all looks good. Double quotes, hit position. Oh yeah, I see it. Oh, maybe it's there. So right here, I need a closing curly bracket followed by a closing parenthesis on line 30. All right, save it, go back to your browser, refresh it, and nice, it works. All right, so if you look over to the right, you can see the web development tool. There's no more errors. I'm in the console. So really, the web development tool is a lifesaver. And so in Chrome, you just hit Control Shift J, and it'll open up the web development tool off to the side of your browser, and it'll show you where your errors are, what line, what file. So you can see I'm going to close out the web development tool and move it over. And let's just expand this guy. All right, so I'm going to refresh it again. My SOAR will go to 0. Time left will start at 60. All right. Well, actually, I'll let the game end. Boom. And here's where we use, in JavaScript, we use the alert. That'll open up an alert pop-up box. And so the text that we put in there was game over, exclamation point, your final score was, and then the value of whatever the variable result was holding. So it'll be whatever this value is for your score. Right, you click OK, that box goes away. And what I do is I click refresh, and my game starts over. All right, there's one. Getting better at this game all the time. The more I play it. So that is your whack-a-mole game, and you can see all 6 boxes here, or all 9 boxes. Sorry, my screen is a little bit not high enough to see everything. All right, let's see if I can get my score higher. And you see how we're using the random square. So my final score was 19, not bad. Best for me so far. So I clicked OK, and then you can see up here your score was 19. Time left is now down to 0. All right, so I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial to build a whack-a-mole game using HTML, CSS, and of course JavaScript. Once again, my name is Scott Bartow, and this class has been offered to you from the Clifton Park Half Moon Library. I hope to see you again at one of my next classes. And thanks again for joining me. I really appreciate it.